Hello and welcome to a special presentation from In the Money Media. This is our Japanese runners at the Kentucky Derby show, brought to you by our friends at the JRA, Japan Racing Association, who many Saturday nights into Sunday mornings through the year present you fantastic content you can wager on your ADW. You can get information about these races right over at inthemoneypodcast.com, including past performances and analysis from the team. The team of which I speak is here with me now. We recently had as a guest on one of our mini pods that will become part of the Monster Pods, coming to us from Japan, Toshi Onikubo. Toshi, how are things?
Everything good, Pete.
We've also got a woman who's been writing great stuff about Pedigree for these horses on the Derby Trail for us. We're going to be doing a whole separate video about that. She's Alex Henry.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And from the TDN, we also bring in Alan Carasso, returning to these airwaves. Alan, everything good?
Hey, guys, everything's great. How about you guys?
Terrific. We got Derby fever. You know, it's spreading, and there's no stories, as far as I'm concerned, that quite match the intensity of the coverage of these Japanese Derby runners. People are hungering for the information in a world where we know so much about so many of the American runners. We bring in some real X factors in terms of these horses coming in who haven't raced in the U.S. before. I'll start with Toshi for a question about T.O. Password that we didn't get to talk about in our in the interview we did that you can find elsewhere here on YouTube. And this one is about the connections. Toshi, what can you tell us about the human connections associated with T.O. Password?
I mean, T.O. Password is, owned by Mr. Ozasa and, trained by Daisuke Takayanagi, traveling with his stable, companion, Teo Saint Doni. I mean, that would be, interesting one. They brought, the company horse, and the Teo Sandrini will be running the Grade 2 before the Kentucky Derby. I mean, on the Oaks Day on Friday. That's as far as I know or I heard. And, he's unbeaten horse. And another interesting factor would be, the Japanese based in Canada, Kizushi Kimura will be riding T.O. Password, who recently got awarded by the Sovereign Award again. I mean, the 3 consecutive years. I mean, he's definitely one of the best jockeys, Japanese jockeys in the world. I mean, he's not the best. So that would be highly, interesting part of the connection, Japanese horse ridden by Japanese jockey, but who's not based in Japan.
It is an interesting story to follow. In our other video, Toshi, we sort of, spoiler alert, I'll give away the end. Interesting, talented horse. Maybe one who's going to be on the outside looking in as far as it comes to the chances in a race like the Kentucky Derby. Alex, I'll bring you in to ask you if you think that assessment is fair. Where do you think this horse stacks up quality-wise, not just with the USA runners, but even with a runner from Japan like Forever Young?
To be honest, he wouldn't be one I would take on logic, but being a fan of JRA, being a fan of the Japanese racing product, I'll definitely have several dollars on him on the day if he makes it in the starting gate. Personally, I don't know if he's going to crown pride it if he makes the gate and just send the lead. He did win on the lead in his last start, the win in race, the Fuji Stakes. That was over 1,800 meters. So I don't think distance is the question. I think it's more of a class test.
It's an interesting observation about the pace angle. I hadn't even thought about that, Alex, until you said it. We've talked a little bit about this horse's pedigree. That's a topic I want Alan to chime in on. Alex described it, Alan, as a class test. Is there anything in this pedigree that suggests to you he might have the class to succeed at a level like this?
I mean, his sire was or is a top dirt horse in Japan, and King Kamehameha can get you any kind. I mean, King Kamehameha was the sire of Chua Wizard, who ran well in the Dubai World Cup. So you would think top over bottom, that pedigree says that 10 furlongs is definitely in the go zone for this horse. I'm a little bit concerned, having watched the Fukuryu, exactly what his best distance is going to be, because he really started to look for the line there in the last 50 or 100 meters, and the runner-up Arade Tabashiro was getting to him with every stride. So I have something of a doubt on Pedigree to begin with. I mean, what can you say? I mean, this horse has made 2 starts. You're going to send him you're going to throw him to the wolves in the Derby. How does he class up with these? My hunch is that he's going to struggle.
I want to bring back that idea of the pace angle to you, Toshi. Could you see the connections bothering to come here? It's a horse that has some speed. Could you see them sending for the lead, hammer and tongs here, and maybe being a pace factor in this race, if nothing else? Does that scenario make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, he can be, but his debut race he didn't race, and then second time out he's a little bit keener, and even he's not fully relaxed and during running the race. So not sure where he's gonna be in the Kentucky Derby. Of course, depends on the pace, but I don't think he's gonna be desperate to read the race. So I think whatever wherever the place he can settle, that's what they want to do. So not sure he's going to definitely for the read.
To be determined whether or not he's going to try to lead. Maybe we'll get some clues when he arrives at Churchill Downs. We've seen so many of these Japanese horses impress us in the flesh at Breeders' Cups and Kentucky Derby before. That's a story we're going to continue to follow. We're going to have updates from the grounds, and something that we'll be paying attention to if he's showing some of that early speed energy. Let's pivot and talk about Forever Young. Now, this is a horse who USA fans will have heard a lot more about at this stage of the game. I deliberately left this out of the conversation, Toshi, in terms of the little mini pod we did before, but I'm curious to get a sense of how excited you are. How excited are Japanese racing fans in general about Forever Young? Not only has he shown what he can do in Japan, but he's shown he can take his act on the road. How excited are you about Forever Young?
I mean, he must be, an exciting one for Japan and Japanese racing, and also, fans and connections. So, I mean, he's, obviously unbeaten, 5 from 5, and, won the Saudi Derby and then Dubai, the UAE Derby. And, particularly, in Saudi, he looked beaten, and, he won it from, nowhere. So I think it's, definitely interesting journey to follow, and for Forever Young to be one of the competitive horse in the pinnacle of horse racing in America would be a hero. Highly interesting, but again, it's not the easiest task for them to overcome. Traveling to Saudi, Dubai, then Churchill. It's a long way, and you already used 2 races this year, and then traveling from Middle East is definitely a barrier to overcome. I mean, again, we haven't had a great track record on dirt in terms of the surface. Japanese horses, not their racing's fault the dirt is. So I mean, it's definitely big challenge for the connection and Japanese racing. I mean, if he comes to the fast 3, it would be great, to be honest. And I mean, it's brilliant result. And then the different fact is he is carrying the best form before the Kentucky Derby to run there as a Japanese contender.
We're seeing the slide up there on the screen now. Forever Young, a perfect 5 for 5. We're estimating that top buyer figure as a 100 for that run back in Saudi. Spoke with Randy Moss on our mini pod about Forever Young. He actually said their estimates even a little higher than that, about a 101. Would have regressed some in the race in Dubai, but got to keep in mind, he was wide the whole time. It was probably an equivalent, if not slightly superior effort in my view. Alan, I want to bring you in, though, to get your thoughts generally on Forever Young. And again, with both you and Alex for this one, I really want an extra note about what you think in terms of Forever Young and his pedigree for this test, both in terms of distance and class.
I mean, I really think it's fascinating. Like, obviously connections have wanted to run him on the dirt from day one, and he was just extremely impressive first time out. He sat behind the pace. It was not speed crazy. He settled kindly. He showed a rating gear, and he still had plenty of running to do, a few lengths to make up turning for home, but he hit that gap so hard and kicked home. I looked it up just a few minutes ago. He finished on debut. He finished over those tracks, Kyoto, I forget, I think it was Kyoto, and he finished in 37.7 for the final 600. For a debuting 2-year-old going 9 furlongs to finish up that way is highly impressive in my mind. And he's just gone from strength to strength from there, from Mombetsu to the win and the Zen Nippon Nishayushun. Saudi, I mean, what can you say about that? He did almost everything wrong a horse could do and still managed to run down a very, very good sprinter miler in the form of Bokum Dano. And, Toshi and I stood probably near each other watching Forever Young a few weeks ago in Dubai. I mean, that was an impossible trip over a track that typically carries speed. You've seen the likes of Crown Pride and Derma Sotogake win that race, but in much different fashion. I mean, I think Forever Young is a different brand of racehorse than anything Japan has sent over. And I was a giant fan of Derma Sotogake last year. I thought he ran well under suboptimal conditions. In my opinion, Forever Young is Derma Sotogake plus. Wow. I mean, he's very, very hard to knock at this point. He's done a lot of traveling, Japan to Saudi to Dubai, and now over here to Chicago quarantine and then down to Kentucky. So he's got it all to do, but listen, he's accomplished everything they've asked of him. He's brilliantly bred for it on the bottom. And his sire was a winner in Dubai, full brother to Loves Only You. Congrats, a big female family on the bottom. It's all there. Like, he ticks all the boxes.
That's some very high praise. Alex, fangirl that you are of these JRA runners shipping internationally, I'm going to take a wild guess that you like this horse. Very curious to hear your specific opinion on Forever Young. And, Alan, we talk about Derma Sotogake, and he did have that suboptimal run in the Derby. You can't forget, he then really established his undeniable quality with that huge run later in the year under what had to be considered very tricky conditions without an ideal prep. So if you're looking at a horse that's better than that, or you're looking at a Kentucky Derby contender, kind of any way you slice it, how serious are you taking him? What sort of price are you looking for? I want your overview of Forever Young.
Yes, if the smile didn't give it away, I am so excited to see Forever Young run. Excuse me. I have a couple of key notes that I found from snooping around from different sources. I definitely want to credit my source, as I'm not sure if this is public yet, but I was able to find someone who was describing his thoroughgraph numbers from 2 to 3. And as a 2-year-old, according to Past the Wire TV, as a 2-year-old, he ran 11 and 8, and then got a 5 3/4 time for or thoroughgraph rating, winning that grade 1 at Kawasaki to end his 2-year-old season. And now as a 3-year-old, Forever Young has paired ones. So that's a pretty great pattern. We've seen some great jumps, some nice consistency. And I definitely think he has the ability to improve off that paired 1 thoroughgraph figure. Also want to note that in terms of pace and trip, I guess I can talk about his price first. I think a lot of us in the community believe he'll probably go off as 3rd choice, perhaps 4th choice, if Catching Freedom takes a little more money than him. I bring up Catching Freedom because there is a team at Blood Horse that went ahead and adjusted his last 3 furlong stretch run time according to the different metric distance of the UAE Derby, and they had him coming home in 36.63 seconds. Again, that's adjusted for the metric distance. Catching Freedom's Louisiana Derby win that looked quite impressive had him coming home at 36.58 seconds. So only 1/20th of a second, 0.05 second difference than Catching Freedom, who's a horse that's on most people's short list, definitely almost everyone's top 5 list. So he's incredibly close to some of the top US talent here. In terms of the ride, I think he'll get the path I think he'll take in the Derby. I went back and I had to look back to 2012 and pull out I'll Have Another, one of my personal favorite Derby winners. And I think he'll get the I'll Have Another trip. I'll Have Another sat like 7th mid-pack after breaking from the 19th post and then just motored home like a freight train to get. Finally found enough to get there to Bodemeister in the end to win. So, and you know what? I'll Have Another since Japan to stand stud. He just got sent back to old friends a month ago. So, hey, maybe it's destiny. Maybe the stars will align.
I love it. I have to ask, there's been a narrative, and I've been one of the people advancing this narrative about fear for Forever Young and the kickback. And Toshi, in part, this comes from the interview that you conducted or helped conduct as translator after the UAE Derby, when it was described that sort of unusual hood that he was wearing that didn't have a cup. It had nothing to do with focus and everything to do with trying to keep him out of the kickback. Combining that with the way he was ridden, I do worry about him being maybe a complicated ride if connections are worried about kickback. Or do you think that might be overblown and it's the kind of thing where if he has to face the kickback, he can? How concerned are you, Toshi, as a fan, with Forever Young's ability to deal with kickback in a race like the Kentucky Derby?
It's a really good question. I mean, but he handled okay in Japan, to be honest, when you look at his first 2 starts in Japan. So I don't know, but the surface and dirt is a little bit different in US or even Dubai or Saudi. So maybe he doesn't handle that. But yeah. I'm not like concerning too much, but if the connection stick with that strategy going all the way, 5 or 6, from the rail, I think that's, he really needs to be different class of champion. And, watching those other, prep races for the Kentucky Derby, there's definitely a couple of good horses. So I'm not sure he can beat those, the leading contenders from, the nation, in the Kentucky Derby, the way he ran in the Saudi and Dubai.
And do you get the sense that the connections are worried about kickback to this point? I don't know if you've spoken to anybody in the camp since the UAE Derby, but do you think that's a legitimate concern that might be in their heads?
I mean, yes, definitely they do. They do worry about that, and that's the way they, the Ryusei Sakai, riding for him in Dubai and Saudi. But I mean, experience and even Dubai, we watched in the morning track work. He was always following the Libyan grass behind the Libyan grass to get kickback. I think experience, that's improve him. And even Yahagi said at the interview, he need to improve from here to win the Derby. And I think that's fair comment. And yeah, to win the Derby, I think he needs to do in really bit different way. That's what I am thinking. I mean, and then my question would be how this the speed figure standing compared to previous years, if any of you can answer.
Well, yeah, I can. I mean, a 1 on Thorograph, that's going to be basically as fast. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that would be as fast as anybody but Fierceness. I mean, if Fierceness runs his race, a 1, even a improved, even a 0, which is, like a 101 buyer when I did a conversion experiment years ago. So you're looking at, basically, I think the same kind of number that a horse like Sierra Leone would run. You're not out of it running that kind of number. And one thing we should do on this video that we've talked about elsewhere, and Alan, I'll let you remind people about the human connections associated. We talked about the human connections with T.O. Password. What about for Forever Young and his camp? What have they accomplished internationally?
Well, I know that Mr. Fuji Tha has been an avid buyer. He's been an avid supporter of American breeze-up sales. He's purchased a lot of expensive horses and taken them back to Japan. And I mean, to be fair, he's had only moderate success with purchases he's made here in the $700 to $1 million range. He does also campaign a horse called Shin Emperor, who raced in last weekend in the Satsuki show and ran very well. It just didn't see out the 2000, I thought. So Mr. Fujita, I think, is he's a motivated owner. I think he wants to do well and participate in these sorts of races. And obviously Yahagi needs no introduction. He's a man that's had success. Anything he touches turns to gold, whether it's here, there, Saudi, Australia, Japan, Timbuktu, you name it.
We got a lot of new people around here, so I wanted to make sure we hit that note. YouTube brings in a very wide audience who might not know about his Breeders' Cup success, about his success internationally. So that was a note I wanted to hit. Last question, quick around the horn, because we're already over time. Alex, I'll start with you. Will this be the year Japan gets the Kentucky Derby winner?
God, I hope so. I'd be so excited. If you hear screaming from Royal Oak, Michigan, it's because Japan won.
I love it. Alan, what about you? Are you willing to go as hard and as bold as Alex and say this will be the year?
Like Alex says, I'm a Catching Freedom supporter as well, but I don't think that this horse has a whole lot to do to bridge that sort of gap. I mean, in terms of who we've brought over, and thinking Lonnie and Master Fencer and Crown Pride and Derma Sotogake, I think I feel pretty strongly that Forever Young is possessed of more talent than any of those. So I'm not going to commit to saying that he's going to be a winner, but I think he gives Japan its best shot to date.
Toshi, where do you stand at the end of the day? What are you expecting? Will this be the year for Japan under the Twin Spires?
Again, different. I hope that's the case. But I think Fast 3 coming for the Fast 3 would be fantastic results for Japan. And horse to beat would be of course Sierra Leone and a fierceness. As you said, Pete. If he's on, he is unbeatable, I'd say.
Will you be here, Toshi? Will you be resuming your translator duties? Will we see you out there?
Not confirmed yet, but fingers crossed.
We hope to see you. Hope to see all of you. We'll also see you all in the JRA coverage on the In the Money Media Network that you can find over at inthemoneypodcast.com. We don't have JRA racing this weekend, but it's coming back next weekend with Fury, and we'll have coverage on the Players Podcast and especially over at inthemoneypodcast.com. This incredibly sharp team will be a part of it, as will our friend Klaus Ebner, who will probably be back on the show as soon as next week to give his thoughts on all these matters. For Alex, for Alan, for Toshi, I'm Peter Thomas Fornatel. May you win all your photos.